How's it going? Thad Brown here with you on the Endgame. It is Monday, March the 30th. It's getting nice and warm outside. Almost time to play some golf outside of a simulator, which will be awesome. Really looking forward to spring and golf season here in Western New York. A huge show today in that I've got about 1,000 different topics I want to hit on. I won't get to all of them. We will talk about Brandon Beane, who just addressed the media at the owners' meetings, what he had to say. We got another window, I think, into the Joe Brady culture that will be soon taking over One Bill Drive. We'll talk about that. And, of course, have to hit on UConn and Duke yesterday. Caden Boozer, the drama, the excitement, the fun that is March Madness again this year. Thanks again for joining me here on Rochester First. Remember, the kids, they all call it Rock One. This is the End Game. Why do we call it the End Game? We're about bottom line discussions. We're not going to mess around with garbage reactions. We want to get right to the point of the things that we're talking about. So we start with something that doesn't have a whole lot of end game to it. It's Brandon Beane. It is at the owners' meetings, because there wasn't a whole lot of gigundous stories that Brandon Beane revealed today at the Combine. Hit on a few different topics in terms of things the Bills want to do. He did confirm, by the way, that there will be a Browns-Bills joint practice, which is cool. Might talk about that a little more later on. He did confirm that the fifth-year option for Dalton Kincaid will be picked up, and that was something that Beane said was going to happen as far back as the Joe Brady press conference anyway, so that's not a surprise. Among the things that were of a little bit of note, Beane did say he was still open to taking a wide receiver in round one of the draft, which he should be. Because, yeah, the Bills did spend, technically, their pick in round two on DJ Moore. So if we, let's take out the DJ Moore part of this, right? If the Bills went into a draft and went receiver 1-2, that would be a reason to be critical. Why would you spend so many resources on one position? But as we've talked about, and has been talked about ad nauseum among people on Bills social media, they really can't do enough at receiver. I said on Thursday that at this point for the Bills, receivers should almost be like what quarterback is for a lot of teams. You should take a receiver every year until you hit on a really good one. So just because the Bills spent pick number 2 or their pick in round 2 on DJ Moore does not mean you go away from receiver in round 1 as a policy. Now, look, the Bills should certainly have particular players that they are targeting, or at least types of players they are targeting for what they feel like is worth a round 1 pick. For example, I don't think the Bills should draft Casey Concepcion now. I love Casey Concepcion. I think he might be the best receiver in this draft. But the Bills have a catch and run receiver already with Khalil Shakir. They have a catch and run tight end already with Dalton Kincaid. With DJ Moore, a guy who can literally do everything. He can get vertical. He can work the intermediate. He can also work the catch and run stuff, the screen stuff. You've got 3 really good options there. Why are you going to add a 4th one? Why do you want to dip into that pool more when you clearly have a need in terms of the downfield, vertical, big play, big body type? Remember, that was what Keon Coleman in large part was supposed to be. He ain't going to be that. Or it doesn't appear like he's going to be that anytime soon. Now, again, DJ Moore can do everything, so he can be a little bit of that. But if you're going to pick out a type that I think makes more sense for the Bills, it is not the small, fast, screen type guys like Casey Concepcion would be. I think you want to go Denzel Boston. I think you want to go Chris Brazzell or Chris Bell, guys who are larger, bigger body, downfield type threats. That makes more sense to me as a receiver in round 1. So it's not going to be just any receiver works for the Bills. Brandon Beane shouldn't just be, in the same way he shouldn't dismiss the position out of hand. It shouldn't be, we just want whoever the best guy is available. I think it has to be a fit for the Bills. And if you get down to pick 26 and the guys on the board are Concepcion, guys like that, then I think you'd be better off passing on receiver in round 1. But the point of the question today, or at least the point of Brandon Beane's answer at the owners' meeting today in Phoenix on Monday was, is receiver still on the table for round one? And Beane said yes. And I think that is very much the right answer. Beane also said that the Bills did talk to Brandon Cooks a little bit about coming back to the Bills. And what Beane said is that they're going to kind of hold off on that until after the draft. That's because, I think in large part, when you signed Trent Sherfield, you've kind of now taken that veteran down the depth chart, there just in case we need some help type role. I don't think anybody wants Trent Sherfield catching important passes from Josh Allen at all this season. But Josh Palmer gets hurt in camp and DJ Moore gets hurt in camp and or Khalil Shakir gets hurt week 3. Trent Sherfield's a viable guy you can put on the field and he can do some things for you. And that's what Brandon Cooks would have been if the Bills didn't already have Sherfield in the house. And Sherfield, of course, can play special teams where Cooks can't do that. So Sherfield offers you a little more versatility with his role. Now, that doesn't mean Brandon Cooks doesn't show up in Buffalo. We just explained how there's a situation or certainly a scenario, and that's just the one I came up with, where the Bills don't grab a receiver early in the draft. If things don't fall the way you hope, if there's a run on receivers, if 7 guys go in the top 20, and remember with the receiver this year, there's kind of a group of 3, Mekhi Lemon, Jordan Tyson, Carnell Tate, who are the elite 3 of this draft. And I use the word elite really loosely because there ain't much elite in this draft at all. So that's the top group. And it's not impossible that you get 2 or 3 or 4 more guys who go before Buffalo's pick at 26. If teams, maybe the top 3 go before like pick 13, which I've seen some mock drafts go that way, then I know the Jets at 16 might take a receiver, so maybe they grab one. Now all of a sudden you feel like there's a run going, teams are trading up, and you get to pick 26 or 7 guys off the board. Well, in that case, there's probably way better value somewhere else, edge or linebacker or corner, that the Bills would probably be better off drafting at 26. So if that happens, and then maybe you miss out on round 3, and now the only receiver you get in the draft is in like round 5, well then I would want to talk to Brandon Cooks because you might need another viable receiver in the room. Because if Keon Coleman does not improve at all, the only guys you really want as a receiver on this team to actually be catching passes on a regular basis are Josh Palmer, Khalil Shakir, and DJ Moore. Mecole Hardman's on the roster, but he's probably more a return specialist. We've talked about Keon Coleman. He'd be your 4th receiver. I think you would want to, at that point, bring in Brandon Cooks because now you're one injury away from needing one of these other guys to be a consistent contributor. And Cooks showed last year he's got some juice. I have questions about Cook with the way he double catches balls, and it cost them in the playoffs on the interception in Denver, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're after the draft and you're a month and a half into the offseason and you don't have anybody else on your team, well, all of a sudden Brandon Cooks is going to look a whole lot better. So that to me is the only scenario where Brandon Cooks comes to the Bills and becomes a potentially viable part of the offense. He was a huge help last year joining the team in November as a late season boost. And he really did open some things up for other guys. But for a full-time situation over the course of a full season, you don't want to have to depend on Brandon Cooks to be the guy. That's why the Bills went out and got DJ Moore. So there are better options, I think better upside options than Brandon Cooks to add in to fill out the depth chart. Ideally, again, you get somebody in the draft to be that guy. But if things don't work out in the draft for whatever reason, then the Bills go back and talk to Cooks, which is, I think, exactly what Brandon Beane is exactly saying today. That, yeah, we've talked to Cooks. We've talked to his agent. We're going to hold off after the draft. And then the unsaid part is we'll go back to him only if we don't get anybody in the draft. So if your team draft a receiver for the Bills, I think Brandon Beane's comments today, overall, between the round 1 receiver thing and the Brandon Cooks thing, are very, very encouraging. The other thing of note that Beane said today was that second-year corner Dorian Strong was uncertain to return because of the neck injury. And that to me is really discouraging because Strong had that Instagram post about a month and a half ago where it certainly seemed like he was very optimistic about being able to come back. And maybe that's still true. Maybe there is an excellent chance that Strong is going to be fine and going to be able to play. again, it's only March 30th. The Bills don't really need to see Dorian Strong at full strength until late July at the earliest. So there's plenty of time for him, whatever the issue is with the neck, to still work things out and get better and heal. But the post he made on Instagram back in January, I think, maybe it was early February, whatever, felt like he was, I'm good. I'm going to be all out there, set to go. Let's play ball. And Brandon Beane threw some cold water on that today with the he's uncertain to come back. A couple of things that go into this in terms of how the Bills are going to be in 2026. Sitting here right this second, they are not very deep at corner. I mean, right now, if you ran the Bills team that they have right now on the field for week 1 and Christian Benford gets hurt, corner would be a disaster. It'd be Max Hairston and I don't know, maybe D. Alford going outside and you play somebody else at nickel. So the Bills still need to add at corner, probably a veteran, probably someone they can depend on to start. Not only if there's an injury, but if Max Hairston just ain't very good, which we haven't seen him be good on a regular basis yet, you need someone to turn to in that situation. So there should be at least one more corner that way. And they could easily draft somebody. Wouldn't be stunned. Corners are certainly guys who can be pretty helpful on special teams. So you get deeper into the draft, 5th, 6th round, whatever. The Bills are probably going to add somebody. But Dorian Strong, even as a low-round pick last year, was a guy that I really thought could be a potential regular starter in the NFL. I really like this press game. I really like this size. He's a taller guy. And in this defense, with the way Jay Valai wants to coach corners, with the way we think Jim Leonard wants to be attacking, pressing, physical, that fits Dorian Strong perfectly. So if Dorian Strong was healthy, I think there's a distinct possibility. Like again, let's say Dorian Strong's 100%, no neck issue, he's all good, ready to go play football. I would not be stunned if Dorian Strong gets ahead of Max Hairston on the depth chart, even though Hairston was the first round pick. And I know Hairston's got wheels and the speed he has, everybody covets and can certainly be a valuable asset no matter what kind of defense you're calling. So Hairston could easily still play, but Dorian Strong fits this D better. I would be very excited to see what Dorian Strong can be in this defense. And at least, at worst, you have a situation where you have 2 guys who are second-year draft picks who are among the top 3 guys on your corner depth chart. So Dorian Strong not being available, not a huge hit to the Bills. Again, he's probably not going to be a starter. And what I'm saying here isn't even probably the most likely outcome. I'm someone who's leaning towards the high value outcome of what Strong is going to be. Doesn't mean that I'm right. But I really wanted to see what he would do in this defense. And if he's not going to be healthy enough, there's only so many chances and years you're going to give a 6th round pick. So if Strong isn't good this year, I think the Bills will have a hard time wanting to hold on to him long term. And maybe his body just is not built for NFL football. Maybe for the sake of the rest of his life, this is something the Bills want to be careful with, but more importantly, Strong may want to move on from. So we'll see. But again, doesn't mean that he can't be good. And it doesn't even mean that his Instagram post was an exaggeration or incorrect. It just means that Brandon Beane right now, apparently, and the Bills have some uncertainty about where Strong could be, which is unfortunate again, because I think he can be a pretty good guy, a pretty good potential corner in the NFL. One of the other things we got from the owners' meetings, Joe Brady apparently did an interview with Tom Pelissero that had people talking over the weekend. One of the topics was Josh Allen. And I think it sounds like the question was a general, how great is Josh? How tough is he? All that stuff. But there was a comment that Joe Brady made that got everyone going that I think is a very interesting potential window into, again, what kind of coach he's going to be. And this is the talk we have about Joe Brady right now. Joe Brady is 0-0. He has never won a game. He's never lost a game. We don't know what he is going to be as a head coach. And we'll find out about the wins and losses soon enough. The thing we might find out about sooner, and I think we are already getting clues about, but certainly when we get into training camp and closer to the season, is about what his culture is going to be like. What are the Bills going to be as a team with Joe Brady setting the tone for everyone? And head coaches very much do that. So the thing that Joe Brady said about Josh Allen and it was kind of almost a throwaway comment amongst all the great things that Josh does, is that the foot injury that he suffered, Allen did, in the Browns game last year was something that left Allen in a position where he could barely walk. Let me see. I wrote down a piece of it, but I want to get a little more from what the story was to, here we go. With talking to Pelissero about the Josh Allen injury last year. And of course, Josh Allen had a surgery on the injury right after the season was over. We saw him on crutches at the Joe Brady press conference. So there was certainly a question about, or not question may not be the right word, but some thought about how healthy Allen was at the end of the season. So the question was about how soon Josh Allen will be ready. And by the way, Brandon Beane said today that Allen's going to be good for the offseason program. He's all good to go, ready for this year. Brady said the thing about Josh Allen, he got surgery after the season, but he's playing as if you think there's nothing wrong with him. The guy could barely walk, and then he's playing games, and it's not impacting his play. The guy could barely walk is an interesting way for the new head coach to phrase what Josh Allen's condition was at the end of last year. Because I went back through practice videos from the Bills' 2 postseason games, the Thursday and Wednesday before the games were played, and Josh Allen was walking just fine. Maybe not 100%, but this was not a guy who could, quote, could barely walk. Allen was on his feet okay. Now, this doesn't mean that Allen was at all exaggerating or lying about the injury or that the injury was not serious. This was a nasty injury. I mean, the guy basically broke his foot, and he was on crutches right after the season was over. So, yeah, this was 100% something that I'm expecting was extremely painful. And does this mean Josh Allen was not tough because Joe Brady may have exaggerated the injury? No. Josh Allen is a bleeping warrior, man. That guy's played through so many things. It is unquestioned how tough and how strong and how much Josh Allen will play through. So this is not at all to intimate that the injury wasn't as serious or as painful as it appeared. It absolutely probably was, without ever walking a day in Josh Allen's shoes. But for Joe Brady to say that Allen could barely walk, he was walking just fine. He was able to be functional. Now, maybe was Josh Allen just doing it when the media was there, and then as soon as the media went away, he started limping around as if he could barely walk? Maybe. Is Joe Brady perhaps talking about the week after the injury happened? Because right after the Browns game, what was it last year? They played the Eagles, second last game of the year, and Allen had 2 limited practices and 1 full practice at the end of the week. Maybe that week he could barely walk. But the 6 practices before the 2 playoff games, Josh Allen was a full participant both times. If he could barely walk, I would think that guy would be limited for some practices. So I don't think the accuracy, I don't think could barely walk is probably an accurate statement about how injured Josh Allen was. Remember, at the end of the year, all NFL players are hurt to a degree. There's nobody who's 100%. There were some noticeable things going back through the practice video. One of the things was that generally Allen and his teammates will all stretch together. Everybody does the little stretching moves. You do the high knees kick, and you do a little jogging back and forth. Stuff that if anybody played football at any level, you've done a little of over the course of your career. And they still do it in Buffalo for about 5 or 10 minutes before practice. In the playoff sessions that media were able to see, Josh Allen was not with the guys when they did that stuff. So even those little jogs, they were apparently preventing Josh Allen from being a part of. The other thing that happens all the time at practice when Josh Allen is healthy, and if anybody's been to a training camp practice, you've probably seen this happen. When the Bills go from that stretching period off to begin their drills and their individual groups or whatever, Josh Allen will often race the other quarterbacks. It's generally pretty funny. And there's a little bit of trash talking about who wins, who gets there first. But it's Josh Allen on a dead sprint going from stretching over to the quarterback area. And to the point where I have watched him do it a few times and thought, why is this guy who is everything to this team's season risking a potential ankle turn just to be the first guy over to the quarterback drill area? But that's how Josh Allen's built. That's how he rolls. Well, in these 2 practice sessions, these 2 weeks of practice, Josh Allen wasn't doing that because he was stretching off to the side already where the quarterbacks were going to operate. So for the Bills to take Josh Allen out of the stretching period, where there's a little bit of like 2-second jogging, and to take away the thing Josh Allen often does, which is sprint from stretching to wherever the quarterbacks begin their practice, I think was a clue that maybe all of us in the media should have noticed more about how injured he was. But could he walk? Yeah, he could walk. Again, I went through the 2 practices, the 2 main practices that media saw, and there are a number of clips where Josh Allen is walking fine. The point of all this, again, is not to hyper-focus on how hurt Josh Allen was. The point of all this is, why did Joe Brady say that Josh Allen could barely walk when that clearly was not true? Allen was hurt. Allen was dealing with an injury. Allen was a warrior. All true. Could barely walk? No. And it stuck out to me because I don't think that's something Sean McDermott would say. Now, I couldn't research back into every Sean McDermott reference about an injury to see if he had ever kind of exaggerated how badly a guy was hurt to give him credit after a season. I know Brandon Beane is not necessarily exaggerated, but certainly has focused on an injury as a reason why a guy wasn't performing a few times. But it did not sound like something that Sean McDermott would do, for better or for worse. And this is not the point to say that Joe Brady is better or worse than Sean McDermott for doing this. This is just apparently how Joe Brady is going to roll. That he is going to hyper protect, hyper push, and hyper support his players to the point where when he wants to talk about how hurt Josh Allen was, he doesn't mind laying it on thick a little bit. Oh, he could barely walk. I don't know how he got around, but there he is on Sundays winning games for us. Again, it's not better or worse. It's just what Joe Brady is going to do. And if the Bills win, the story will be Joe Brady is a player's guy, supports his guys, always has his guys back. And if the Bills start losing, well, then laying it on thick is going to look like he's detached from reality, that he's not being real. And that stuff will lose you a locker room in fairly short order. But again, it's not about Joe Brady being bad or good. This is apparently just how Joe Brady wants to roll. And that's interesting. Because I just laid out for you 2 potential scenarios about how that could end up. No matter what Joe Brady's going to be, if the Bills win games, it's going to work. And if the Bills lose games, then it might be seen as a problem, or at least something that Joe Brady's going to have to figure his way out about. This is how he wants to operate amid obstacles or adversity or whatever. And I'm sure that in his first year, like anything else that anyone does in year 1, there's going to be a bit of a feeling out process. Does this work all the time? Can I act this way and still have the support, have the belief, and have the motivation of my locker room? But I thought it was interesting that Joe Brady made it seem like Josh Allen is limping around or rolling around on a scooter when there he is at practice, appearing to move around fairly normally. Like I said, there were certainly clues that Allen was not 100%. But could barely walk? No, that's not what Josh Allen was. And it's not even just about practice. We would see Josh Allen in the locker room while we're doing interviews. Media are there not only for 15 or 20 minutes at the start of 1 or 2 practices a week, but there's also a 45-minute period where we are allowed in the locker room 3 days a week. So there's times in there where you see Josh Allen moving around. And if I had remembered Josh Allen, quote, could barely walk, that would have stuck with me for sure. And I think it would have been mentioned by some of the media. Again, this doesn't mean that Josh Allen wasn't hurt or wasn't dealing with a nasty injury. I virtually guarantee you he was. But could barely walk, that to me was a noticeable exaggeration. And again, another departure from what Sean McDermott would be with the Bills. One more thing with the Bills here. A.J. Epinesa was supposed to sign with the Browns. There was a report during free agency that he was going to get I think it was a 2-year contract, maybe a 1-year contract with Cleveland. That fell through because of a failing a physical, essentially, thing. They The Browns pulled a Max Crosby with A.J. Epinesa, for lack of a better way to express it. And some Bills fans wonder, does Epinesa now come back to Buffalo? I would not hold my breath for that. I think Epinesa, I thought from the beginning, once Jim Leonhard came on board, I did not think that Epinesa was going to be a great fit for this defense. He is a solid 4-3 defensive end. That scheme and that formula, I think, fit Epinesa's game better than what the Bills want to do going 3-4. I think he's a little small to play inside the tackle as a 3-4 defensive end, and I don't think he's quite athletic enough to be the wide 9 outside linebacker type. Now, again, the Bills, I'm sure, will do a decent amount of what will look like a typical 4-3, even with Jim Leonhard running the show, but I don't think it'll be enough to where I want to bring A.J. Epinesa back as a regular member of the Bills defensive line core. Now, the Bills do have a couple defensive ends in Michael Hoyt and Landon Jackson who are coming off major injuries. So maybe those guys aren't healthy enough to where you do bring Epinesa back to shore things up in the early part of the season and see how it goes. And maybe Epinesa does fit, or maybe you figure things out that fit him a little bit better. But that to me is the only reason you bring him back. This is not a guy who's built to be here. He's a really solid third or fourth down the depth chart defensive end. A guy that you can count on to get a solid, 30 to 40 snaps per game. He's going to defend the run just fine. He's ridiculously good for whatever reason, taking away flat passes. So he's got value in the NFL, but not enough that you want to try and square peg round hole him with what the Bills are doing in this defense. So I don't think Epinesa is the guy the Bills want to bring back, especially because for whatever you think of the Browns, they did essentially just say that Epinesa is not healthy enough for them. So that at least means something is going on that could make teams weary about wanting to bring him in, which is unfortunate because the guy certainly belongs in the league. He can play. But if you're talking about, from the Bills' point of view, a guy who doesn't fit, a guy who is not a ridiculously impact player, and someone who's nursing an injury, that's not something that I think the Bills want to pursue. Once again, we'll see what happens after the draft. I do think the Bills are highly likely to attack edge in the draft and add somebody there. But if you strike out on that position for whatever reason, well, then maybe A.J. Epinesa becomes a guy you have to bring back just as someone who can fill in some gaps and, again, provide some reps until Hoyt or Jackson or whatever else the Bills want to do in that spot come back and make sense. All right, let's take a break here. When we come back, I got a lot more to get to, man. I am hardly done. I do want to talk about the tush push because apparently it's not going anywhere, and I don't think that's a good idea. Speaking of not going anywhere, the issues between the refs and the NFL, we'll talk about that, and I got to hit on Duke UConn for sure. So plenty more still to come here on the Endgame. My name is Thad Brown. This is Rochester First, but the kids, the ones who always did the best stuff and were the most popular ones, they all call it Rock One. We're back right after a break. Thad Brown back here with you on the Endgame here on a Monday. April is 2 days away. Can't wait. Masters next week. It's awesome around here. Awesome. Best time of year. Well, I think maybe summer would be a little bit better, but we're getting close. We're getting close. We're getting close. All right. So speaking of April and spring and this time of year, what a game yesterday. Duke and UConn. If you didn't watch it, I'm sorry. It was the epitome of March Madness. Duke was up 19 in the first half, up 15 at halftime, up 17 in the second half. And then UConn came all the way back. I had people over at the house. We were having a little get together for my daughter being back in town from college. And I wasn't really super paying attention to it. Obviously, as UConn got started to flirt with being a possession down late in the game, we were watching it more. But I never really felt like UConn was legitimately going to win the game, especially because Duke had total control the whole way through. And even at the end, UConn never really got it to within a possession with a legitimate opportunity. I think they might have had one possession with a minute or so to go where they were down 3 and took a 2 or got fouled and hit a free throw. But at the end of the game, they're down 2. They had just made a couple free throws 10 seconds ago. Duke really probably could have just held the ball in the backcourt and let the clock run out. They didn't even have to advance it across half court. But UConn was pressing, and Caden Boozer, who is the twin brother of the other Boozer, whose first name escapes me right now, who's the better of the two, but certainly they're both legitimate, solid players. Sons of Carlos Boozer, the famous former Duke basketball player. Caden Boozer, Cameron's the other one. Okay, Cameron, that's what I thought. Cameron Boozer and Caden Boozer. Caden Boozer gets the ball in the backcourt and gets stuck behind a double team after picking up his dribble. So he's got to go somewhere with the ball and immediately tries to fire something down court to a couple of different teammates who are open. And the ball gets deflected, and I'm sure you've seen the highlight by now. UConn gets a steal and wins the game. And Caden Boozer took a lot of criticism over the last 24 hours or so, and deservedly so. Look, he made a bad play. There's no two ways of talking about that. He screwed up. He screwed up. And a number of different people have pointed out today that of all the things that Boozer did, passing or could have done, passing was the one thing that wasn't correct. He could have just stood there and held the ball and waited to be fouled. He could have passed it to somebody who was closer, who was certainly a more high percentage connection. He could have not ever picked up or put the ball on the ground to dribble. One of the things that Doug Gottlieb said that was wrong was when Boozer dribbles, now you're committing, because once that double team comes, now you have to pick the ball up and now you can't dribble again. So even putting a dribble down was the wrong thing to do. From Boozer's point of view, watching the play again, I can understand what he's thinking, because all 5 UConn players in the backcourt, there are 2 Duke players in the front court. And again, Doug Gottlieb, and I thought his post on X was pretty good. He did say that the way Duke had it spaced was correct, that if Duke has one of those 2 players in the backcourt to help Caden Boozer, well, that makes it easier for UConn to cover everybody. So by having 2 guys in the front court, that's what you're supposed to do. And Caden Boozer sees 2 guys wide open and thinks, if I just get the ball to one of these guys, we're good. And not only that, Boozer said later that one of those 2 players was one of Duke's best free throw shooters. So in his head, he's thinking, get the ball to someone who's going to be a good free throw shooter, which are all admirable, reasonable things to think, except that they're blatantly wrong. I don't like getting on an 18 to 19 to 20-year-old about a mistake like this, because this kid is going to live with this forever. He said afterward, I ruined our season. And he's not wrong. He's not wrong. Now, to be fair, Braylon Mullins, who hit the game winner, still has to knock down like a 30-foot shot to win the game. So even after the turnover happens, Duke could have, I guess in theory, defended it better. Or a guy taking a 1 out of 15 shot, you could have got one of the other 14 outcomes where he doesn't make it. So it wasn't 100% on Caden Boozer, but he certainly made the mistake that killed the game for Duke. And to further the point about how it's not all his fault, Duke was up 17. At any other point in the second half, they could have played better and prevented the need to have to hold on to a 2-point lead at the very end of the game. I also want to say, I think Boozer deserves an amount of credit too, because he sat there and took questions from media over and over and over. Tough ones too. I mean, you watch some of the clips on social media, and it's one after another, different ways to ask why did you screw up? How did you screw up? How could that have ever happened? And he sat there and answered them all, was polite. And for someone that young, I thought that was pretty impressive. It's not the same as it was 10 years ago, when these are kids who are just playing for a scholarship. Even though they're kids, and I don't ever want to see a kid in this spot, they are also professionals now. They are getting paid giant sums of money. and for the most part. And I'm sure Caden Boozer is one of those guys who is getting pretty well compensated for being a part of the Duke basketball team. That doesn't mean you don't feel bad for him. That I'm to the point now too where I don't like watching any sports event where the game ends because somebody screwed up. Like that Dodgers Blue Jays World Series last year, when we got to the very end of some of those incredible Game 6, Game 7, the one thing that I was most interested in seeing is the game not ending because a ball goes through someone's legs or somebody airmails a throw over the first baseman. Just give me a winner, not a loser, as much as possible. And with the World Series, I think we got that. We certainly did not get that yesterday with Duke UConn. And Braylon Mullins hits the incredible shot, and that really should be the story, but you can't walk away from what happened beforehand with Caden Boozer. Because as good as the Braylon Mullins shot was, we've seen a number of guys hit three-pointers from 10, 12 feet beyond the line. It's not that crazy a shot. Certainly in that situation, it's really cool. But the mistake that Boozer made certainly outweighs the positive of that three-point shot in terms of the situation and handling the pressure and what should have been done. So I get the criticism for sure, and I understand it. And this is something that Caden Boozer is going to have to live with, even if you could understand some of what he's thinking. But at least I will give him credit that the first few minutes, the first hour of having to live with this, I thought Boozer did a pretty good job. I want to go back to the NFL here for a couple things. Number one, the refs remain in the news because now we're getting to the point with the labor relations, the negotiation here, that NFL is putting things out that criticize the Referees Association. The NFLRA is putting things out to criticize the league, and these guys are just sniping back and forth through the media, which A, shows you that this issue is not going to be solved anytime soon. But we can also now get a little bit of a look about what both sides think, what they want. And the league posted something yesterday, or at least leaked something through Tom Pelissero, who is the same guy, by the way, I talked to Joe Brady. Tom Pelissero's all over the news lately, about what the league is at least trying to make the public think about what their side is. Among the things that the league accused the refs of resisting are to shorten the dark period after the Super Bowl. In other words, the number of weeks where referees are essentially on vacation. The league also says the refs are resisting the idea of taking underperforming officials and sending them to spring leagues for work, for development. And then the third thing the league says the refs don't want to do is ending a seniority-based playoff system. Now, that was the one that got some people going. Because, look, the general public thinks refs are terrible. Again, we talked about it last week. There's very little factual basis on this. Everyone just says the refs are terrible because, well, they look bad, so they must be terrible. And if you throw at the general public, well, they pick playoff and Super Bowl officials because of seniority and not performance, everybody's going to latch onto that really fast. Here's the truth, though. The way playoff officials are decided has very little to do with seniority. The number one thing when it comes to playoff and Super Bowl assignments is performance. That's where it starts. The league apparently has a performance system that measures officials throughout the year. And when you think of who are the officials that we want to have work these playoff games, these Super Bowl games, you start with how well they've performed. Now, there are stipulations that come along with that too. If you want to work a Super Bowl, no matter how good you've been, you still have to be in your fifth year of being an official. So they don't want anybody in their first, second, third, fourth year working a Super Bowl. If you're an NFL referee, the white hat, like what Sean Smith is wearing on camera right now, you have to be in your third year as a referee at least, not just as an official any spot, but as a referee. And then you also had to have either worked a recent conference championship in the case of a non-referee, or as a referee, you have to have done, I think it's a recent playoff game. So yeah, there's some seniority that goes with it. But all that is doing is taking away the idea of an official who has very little experience working a Super Bowl. Seems pretty logical to me, right? That you wouldn't want someone in their second or third year to be working a Super Bowl when you have most likely a variety of other guys who are just as talented, who have more experience to be in that game. So if you want to take the league's side on this issue, then your argument is there must be 2 or 3 better officials in their second or third or fourth year who would be more qualified to work this particular playoff game, this particular Super Bowl. And while that may be true, I'm not really going to be bothered by it if the way the league has a setup that a little bit of experience is a part of the qualification to work a championship game. By the same token, the guys who work wild card in some divisional round games, the other qualification for, so in other words, the tier down from being a Super Bowl or championship tier level official is to be a playoff tier official. And in that case, there are a couple other stipulations that go with it, but essentially you can't be a first year official. I think that makes sense. You're telling me that no matter how good a guy is graded, if this is year one as an NFL referee, you can't work a playoff game. That's fine with me. I don't seem to think that there's going to be much of a problem if we make a guy prove himself for more than 1 year before you put him in the pressure cooker of a playoff game. So I think that even though people, some of the public have looked at what the NFL has put out there and has said, these referees are terrible, let's make them earn their job. Why? The players who play in the playoff games, they have to win games. They have to earn their way there. Why can't the referees do it too? The answer is, for the most part, the referees are doing it. And what the NFL is doing right now is feeding the narratives that most of the public and the media will chew up and digest happily about how bad officials are, even if they're not really even close to being true. And the officials have put out a couple of responses that say this is nuts. We do base our playoff and Super Bowl assignments on performance first. Even if the referees aren't going to point this out because it's hard to explain, there are a few stipulations that do involve seniority. But this is not a situation where the refs are trying to make sure that only the guys who have been around for 20 years work Super Bowls and everybody else is out. The way the system works is, number one, you have to be really good at your job, but then number two, you have to have at least put in a reasonable amount of time to be trusted with these games. Now, this doesn't mean that the referees aren't playing their own games, because their argument, their rejoinder to Tom Pelissero today was, look at how much money umpires and NBA and NHL referees make. We want to be paid like them. Well, I mean, yeah, but you guys don't work anywhere near as many games as those guys do. So there's no world where I'm going to sit here and say that an NFL referee who works maybe 20 games in a year should be paid the same as an umpire who works 160 games a year, or as an NHL or NBA ref who works 75 to 80 games a year. Now, I didn't dive into the actual numbers to see if the percentages were appropriate, or if it maybe the NFL is looking for a similar cut based on how many games they work. But bottom line is, over the next few weeks, you are going to see both sides happy to feed their view, their opinion, their talking points to whatever media will listen. And while it may sound legitimate, well, it may get fans and media fired up about the refs who are terrible, wanting to get more money that they haven't deserved. Remember to kind of look through what's being reported, because this isn't necessarily factual negotiation points. This is a narrative that one side is trying to spin. And the NFL is going to have an easier time doing it because, as we've talked about a few different times, fans and media will be more than happy to eat up the idea that these officials are terrible and don't deserve whatever it is they may want. And again, as I pointed out with what the officials are claiming to be upset about, they're going to spin their own narratives too. They're going to weave their own web of slight deception to try and push public opinion to their side. Their opinion right now, or their take right now, is, look at these billionaire owners. How could they not pay us more? They have all this money. The unfortunate situation is, it's the real sticking points of this negotiation are the things that are always the sticking points of any negotiation. It's about the money. And number two, the NFL, as we know, which has never turned down a dollar in the recent history of the league, is going to probably take this to a point that is going to make us really nervous about what the product is going to look like in the fall, because it was just 15 years ago when they thought replacement refs were the right choice, and we saw how that turned out. So don't immediately buy into whatever narrative either side is selling, but the fact that both sides are selling a narrative is a cause for concern. All right, every single week, we bring in another member of the sports team to talk about things that got our attention over the weekend. It is time once again for, you see this? Caleb Carr is in today. You can fix up your camera there, by the way, buddy.
Yeah, we're zooming in.
Let me fire up your microphone too. So I hit on a few topics, and man, I could have done about 17 things for this week, things I've already talked about, things I haven't talked about. I'll let you go first, and then we'll see how many of the 8 things I have left on my list here we get to. But what do you got?
That was one. I was like, there's so much. And I was like, nah, he might talk about this. Oh,
right.
He'd probably honestly talk about that. So I landed on, surprise, surprise, a college basketball story. In the 9-seeded Iowa, 3-seeded Illinois Elite 8 game in the South region, with about 7:43 left in the first half, the buzzer, the shot clock buzzer, the game buzzer that tells you, hey, there's a sub that needs to come in, or, oh, hey, the clock's out, or the shot clock's out. It just got stuck, and it just ran
for like 10 minutes, right?
I think it was 7 minutes that the buzzer itself ran, but it caused an 11-minute delay because they had to, once they finally fixed it, which according to the NCAA senior vice president of basketball, Dan Gavitt, they had to just completely unplug everything.
Right,
they just had to
that, yeah.
shut down the entire scoreboard, which caused the Jumbotron that's in the middle of the court to just shut off. And that was shut off for a little bit, actually. So they didn't have the game playing up there when they did restart. So the announcers, if you were watching the game, the announcers were talking about how, like, it's a little weird lighting in here right now. But yeah, that ran for 7 minutes, 11-minute delay. There were lots of complaints coming from the fans because the buzzer's loud.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter where you go. And at Houston, that's an NBA stadium. So they've got a loud buzzer, and that thing just kept running. Luckily, I think when it happened, yes, it was 22-20 Iowa was leading. So luckily, this didn't cause much of a disruption in the game flow. I think Iowa still had a 32-28 lead when it got to halftime, 7.5 minutes later. And then Illinois, as you can see, made a comeback in the second half, made it to their first Final Four since 2005. But there was a lot of complaints. The players were re-warming up on the court once the buzzer finally stopped, and they were like, okay, let's see if we can figure out how to work around this. The players started to warm up on the court. I think they ended up having to go to a couple guys on the sideline using manual little air horns
to signal a guy coming into the game.
Yeah, to signal guys coming into the game, because, I mean, the shot clock and the game clock was still working, but the buzzer just didn't go off. So they had to have a guy on the sideline. But quite an interesting turn of events over there at Toyota Center in Houston.
Were you watching the game when it happened?
I was,
yeah.
Yes.
So what was it like?
Well, on the broadcast, they did a good job of you couldn't really hear it, but it was just people in the stands just covering their ears. The players, obviously when you're in a timeout during a game, those stadiums get loud. So you got to kind of huddle close. But they were hugging each other so that they could hear each other talk, because you couldn't hear anything. The announcers were, of course, getting a kick out of it. Got to be someone that can unplug this thing, or got to have a buzzer expert somewhere in here. But you could tell that it was getting restless. I think 3 minutes in, there was starting to be boos from the fans in the arena, which makes sense.
I can't imagine having
headaches.
that exactly.
Yeah.
For 7 straight minutes.
Yeah, it's a lot. I think the mascot, was it Iowa's mascot? I believe it was Iowa's mascot. Could be wrong, but had these big styrofoam just blocks that he was just going around putting on putting on fans' heads. Yeah.
Crazy.
It was funny. Luckily it didn't take away from the game. It was still a good game.
Right. If that had happened with 15 seconds ago in a timeout, yeah.
I mean, that happens with 7.5 left in the second half, and that's a big problem.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still a problem, obviously, that the Toyota Center, it's had some issues with the Houston Rockets over the years. Still a problem that you probably got to figure out, make sure it doesn't happen again. But it's lesser that it happened in the first half. I'm
going to go away from college basketball with my you see this for the weekend. But as a college basketball guy, let me get your take on what we've seen so far. I know early there wasn't a whole lot of upsets. That was kind of expected. But I think from rounds 2 all the way through the Elite 8, there have been a number of surprises. I mean, Tennessee getting the win.
Over Iowa just playing Illinois.
Exactly. Getting to the Elite 8
was wild.
I mean, UConn yesterday was a upset in the game.
That was an insane game.
Yeah.
That was a wild game.
Where are you landing on what kind of tournament you think that this is?
I think this has been a great year. I mean, I get what you've got. No, I don't want to say casuals because it makes it sound mean.
And that's who most people are this time of year anyway.
Most college basketball fans in March are casuals, quote unquote. And they just want to see, and me too, just want to see the upsets. You just want to see High Point make it to the Elite 8. You just want to see whatever team comes out of the Ivy League win a game. Like that's the stuff you want to see. Unfortunately, with NIL and the just kind of college landscape, it's a lot harder for that to happen. But what it gives us is Duke, UConn in the Elite 8 coming down to the final second. What it gives us is really good games. Even Iowa, like Iowa still was a really good game. It gives us these insane games, and now we get to look forward to Illinois and UConn, which is going to be amazing, and probably, I mean, honestly, maybe the championship game before the actual championship game. Arizona, Michigan is going to be the game of the tournament. It's going to be insane, but it gives us these really big games. Because listen, I love to see like a Florida Atlantic a few years ago make it to, I think they went to Elite 8 or Final Four. But then they got swept. They got toasted. Same thing with San Diego State a few years ago. Like they got toasted in the Final Four.
To be fair, one of the great championship games was Butler Duke with the way that ended.
Yes.
So it can go the other way.
It can go the other way, but you often see, and the runs are great. It sucks that they kind of end with a 20-point loss most of the time. And as much as I love the upsets, I think these matchups of games that we had this past weekend and that we're going to have next weekend are elite.
To be fair, again, other than UConn Duke, those other 3 Elite 8 games were terrible for the most part.
They weren't terrible.
They were pretty close.
The first 2, I think it was Arizona, Purdue.
Well, that's right. Iowa, Illinois didn't get out of hand until the very end.
No, it didn't get out of hand until the very end. It was still a good, what do you want to give? Like 35?
5 points, yeah,
like 35 minutes maybe.
Yeah.
Now the Michigan Tennessee. That one was pretty bad.
Yes.
But even Arizona, Purdue was still a pretty good game for most of it.
All right, so for me, the thing that I cannot stop watching is already the way ABS is becoming an awesome part of Major League Baseball. The highlight of the first weekend of baseball with ABS was Eugenio Suarez, who you see on your screen right now, challenging back-to-back strike 3 calls from CB Buckner in Red Sox on Saturday and being right on both of them. And the best part of this isn't that ABS is working, isn't that Suarez was correct, isn't that, as some people will say, that umps are getting their comeuppance. The best part of this was the loudest cheer of the game. A game the Reds won was the second time he won the challenge. So not only is this working from the point of view of the Major League Baseball is getting more calls correct, but they are doing it in a way that fans are not only tolerating, they're enjoying. And it wasn't just this game too. Every challenge I saw was perfect because, okay, you get a call and then you get a challenge, the umpire announces it, and then there's like 4 seconds of anticipation until the computer tells you what the call is. And you get to see, oh, it's a strike. Oh, it's wrong, and people are loving this. And I really thought that ABS would be like the rest stop before we got to full robot umpires with balls and strikes. I no longer need to go any further than this.
I think this is perfect.
This is awesome. Have you ever, the other thing is, watching this, I thought this weekend that if Game 7 of a World Series, 4-3, 3-2 count, comes down to this, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be fantastic.
It depends on what side you're on.
Well, for sure.
It depends on what side you're on.
Let's say it's like Seattle, I don't know, Pittsburgh, a World Series that would never happen, but one that most of us are going to have very little rooting interest for.
I think it would, Game 7, I mean, I like how excited you are. I wouldn't put it in the category of like a walk-off home run or anything, or even just like a walk-off double.
Yes.
But it would be just I like how like the anticipation of it, because it's not just like, okay, strike, and now it's done. There's no conversation to be had. It's like strike, well, let's see, and then it's the anticipation. There's been a few walks turn strikeouts or strikeouts turn walks also, haven't there? So far?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's gone both ways.
I think that's my favorite, is like to see the batter start walking to first base and now he's got to turn around and make the walk of shame back to the dugout.
Right.
Because it ended up being called a strikeout.
And the other thing is, too, umpires who, I think in baseball, maybe more so than other sports, I think umpires can go on a power trip faster for a number of reasons.
Yes.
And there is no recourse from this. You as an umpire can't complain about it, can't make a face about it. If you are making the call wrong and the players are right and the computer proves it, all you can do is eat it. And CB Buckner.
Put your hands up.
Exactly. Or put your head down as he did. I hope this does make umpires better. Some of these guys that have strike zones that have been not correct for the longest time now may, in theory, get improved. But the idea that you as an umpire who ruled the world unquestionably now have to accept this as a better version of what you're trying to do. I find that part of it fascinating also.
I love how behind it the fans are. I don't think this will happen, but I worry that we're in a honeymoon phase with it.
It's a fair
and
point.
that by the end of the season, or maybe next season, fans are going to be fans and players, because this is something that I think players will find a way to take advantage of it. Like, obviously, it's to help them. It's to benefit, well, one side at least. But I think this is one of those things that at some point, someone's going to find a workaround, or someone's going to find some type of way to take advantage of this, and then it's not going to be as fun anymore.
Certainly the novelty will wear off relatively fast, and that will make it less fun.
Yeah.
But I think it'll be
let's
a while.
have fun with it while it lasts.
Exactly. And again, most replay takes forever. This replay very much does not. So I think that's
very
in its
quick.
favor.
Yeah.
I am interested in your point about players and managers taking advantage of it. I think that's a legitimate concern. I just can't think of how they would do it right now.
I don't either, but I'm also not an MLB coach. I'm not nearly smart enough to figure it out.
Fair point for sure. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of The Endgame. We're back on Thursday. For Caleb Carr, I'm Thad Brown. Thanks very much for watching. The news is next right here on Rochester First. We'll see you again in a few days.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 On Demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.